So without further ado, Brad Olsen.
Okay. Well, thank you. What a great event. So honored and privileged to be here. First time at the Journey of Truth. As Tyler said, it was a one-off last year, but such overwhelming response. I have heard nothing but great things about last year. And many of you also came to the Orlando event, which is coming up again in October. I'll be there with T-Rod and a few others. And it's great to be back to the land of Lincoln. You know, this is where I was born, in Illinois, in the Chicago area. Went to Illinois State University in Normal, Illinois. And now I'm on the West Coast. I was in California for a number of years, and I produced an event called the Weird Street Faire in San Francisco. And if I ever write an autobiography, it'll be From Normal to Weird. I think that seems like a good name. But so this is going to be a double header. Usually at conferences, they give you 1 hour, 15 minutes for Q&A. But since I don't have anybody following me, I'm going to try to go through 2 presentations. First, obviously, you can see here the Unsolved Mysteries of South America. And I had the great honor and privilege of going down there about 4.5 years ago. And this led to my trip to Antarctica, which will be part 2 here. So we're going to get started because this is a lot of talking for 2 hours, but hopefully my voice will hold out. So as we come down to Earth from outer space, this being the southern half of South America, this was the area that I was focused in coming in. Yeah, round Earth. I'll get in a little bit about that too. Yeah. Fortunately, got some bad news for you flat earthers. Yeah. Oh, it's spherical. And you can see it from outer space, as you can here too. But if we were to be approaching planet Earth, let's say from outer space, and we're coming in towards South America, we're moving in and we start zooming in down towards the Nazca Plain. Something very curious appears. How many of you heard of the Nazca Plain and the geoglyphs? Almost everybody. You guys, you know all this stuff too, but hopefully it'll be some interesting images here to share this journey with you, because I would have to say that I've had the great honor and privilege of traveling to all 7 continents of the world now. And I'll tell you, South America has to be right up there with Asia or Egypt, as far as the density of sacred places. The sacred valley of Cuzco, which I'll get to in a moment, has the most amount of megaliths per capita anywhere in the world. There's so many that you'll be driving up to, say, Sacsayhuaman from Cuzco, and oh, wow, look at that big megalith site. And you almost don't even see it because there's just so many there. So I'd highly recommend, if any of you had the opportunity to go to South America, to do it. It was all shut down right after my trip, of course, because of COVID, and only has reopened, but some countries like Peru still remain with a lot of restrictions. So as we come down on the Nazca Plain, we start seeing these characters, and you can see the anthropomorphic versions of thunderbirds, of a monkey, of this spider here, which I want to focus on in a second. I find it the most fascinating, but you have lizard creatures, a cat. I mean, some of them appear otherworldly or maybe extinct species. But you see this spider here, if we were to look at it from the air, that's a photo of it. And it has this little leg that sticks out. You can see it a little better in this slide. That little appendage on one of the back legs. And you'd think maybe that's a typo. Maybe they just made an error interpreting it, but actually not. So this spider only lives in the Amazon rainforest. And this female version of this spider keeps her young in one of her legs. Now, what's so very interesting, spiders are very small, right? You'd only be able to see that with a microscope. So you're looking at a spider here from high above in the macro, And then it has this little appendage with all the eggs in the micro. So they obviously had some kind of knowledge going on. I'm sure many of you have heard of or read the book Chariot of the Gods by Eric von Daniken. And one of his really amazing chapters in that book was on the Nazca line here. And so this spider is of the genus Riccinuli, one of the rarest spiders in the world, found only thousands of miles away in the Amazon rainforest. So not only is it showing the micro and the macro, but it's of something that someone must have taken this information up to the Nazca line for 1,000 miles. So this is also very interesting on the Atacama Desert, which is one of the driest places on Earth. They discovered this little guy. You can see how small he is compared to these glasses here. And they did radar, X-ray scans of this guy, fully developed internal organs, still had some of the skin intact. And this goes along with a lot of the legends of these highly telepathic little aliens that live up on the Atacama Desert. And his nickname is Ata. So he obviously has a big head. And we're going to get into the big heads, as you saw on the first slide there with the elongated skulls. But this is just to show that alien species can come in all sizes, including the size of your glasses. So moving on to Cuzco, the Puma city, there are representations of the three animals that were very sacred to the Inca, that being the puma of the land, the condor of the air, and the serpent in the water. And sometimes these megaliths will show you some of the animals. So moving into the town of Cuzco, you start to see these megalithic rocks all over the place. It is one of the oldest inhabited cities in the world, but there was a period of time when it was uninhabited. And then the Incan, who were actually an invading force, got to Cuzco and said, oh, wow, look, we got this whole city already pre-made for us. Why don't we just set up shop here? And so they did. And you can see some of the Incan designs as well as the Spanish designs. But the pre-Incan, that's these megaliths. And this is the stone of 12 angles. Look at what it would take to put those stones together so precisely. And I tried it with a credit card and a piece of paper to try to insert it. No go. Those things are so well designed and built that they can't still. Now, these are earthquake proof because, of course, Peru and Chile and Ecuador, Colombia are on the ring of fire. That is a very geothermal active, volcanic active, earthquake prone region with tsunamis as well. And so these megaliths have stood the test of time. They have stood up to all of these earthquakes. Sometimes in Machu Picchu, you'll see some that got a little shaken up, but for the most part, these have stood. And conventional archaeologists may have you believe that the Incan cut these stones with simple tools, including bronze chisels and stone hammers. I don't know about that. These are pretty amazingly well cut, well designed, and well preserved. And then they have a lot of these little shapes that are still there, including these knobs. And I'll get into that in a little bit, tell you a little about that. But here you can see the obvious difference in the building styles of the Incan culture that was there before them. So in the middle there are some other blocks, not of a megalithic style. And then you have the stucco walls of the Spanish across the alley there, those two of an inferior design. So you get these kind of stones that are cut in all these odd angles. And I tell you, when I was taking this photo, I'm thinking, it's like a challenge. They're putting it out there. They're saying, hey, we dare you to try to cut your stones like this and put them together. And I would have to think, I'm not sure a lot of stonemasons could even build in this type of structure anymore. These are just so precisely fit and formed, and why they would do these wild angles. And look at this little hook mark. You'd think that would just crack right off, but there it is, holding its preservation. I had the great honor of going down to South America with Nassim Harriman and Brian Forrester, two greats in the field. And Brian and I communicate a bit and share photos and images with each other. Some of these images you're seeing in this show have to do with that. And Brian has been here so many times. I mean, it's probably his 40th or 50th time to Sacsayhuaman. And what he showed us at the beginning was at all of these megalithic sites, at least the big ones that are still well preserved, they always have an entrance that goes through a cave. And this cave went in a twisty, turny kind of way so that it was pitch black in there. And so just like when you come out to the light, you're momentarily blinded. That was the case with this particular site. And so it becomes clear that what this is a giant ritual site, that if you were to come in from the light and out to this incredible megalithic wall, and I'll show you how big some of these megaliths are, but you can see the people down here. And so we brought these arc crystals and did a series of meditations there. Down in the valley there, that's where Cuzco is. This is up at 13,000 feet elevation. There are a few people on our tour that got elevation sickness and missed most of the trip. They just couldn't get out of bed because some people are very susceptible to high altitudes. And this is about as high as you can get. So that just adds to this mystery of these megaliths that not only how did they move them, but how did they move them at such high elevation? And using kind of tools that you only find with some of these megaliths. And these megalith sites really do span the world. So here's Brian showing us this tool cutting. And boy, I tell you, you could have dropped a marble and it would have rolled right down. It was so smooth cut. It's just amazing how well it's cut. And here you see the Serpent of the Water. This is one of these stone towers. That's Lake Titicaca. We'll get there in a second. So they not so subtly put in a lot of their deities all over the place. Here's one of our meditations at one of the megalithic buildings. And if you were to try to build in this style, to this extent, to this scale, I don't think it can be done. I really don't. Not with this kind of style, because you see these blocks are all so perfectly fit and they are of this polygonal architecture. That means many different angles. So it would have been just so much easier to cut the same size block and just build your wall that way. But no, they had to do it the polygonal way. And yeah, I do another talk about the polygonal architecture around the world. It's quite remarkable. And I'll tell you, they are around the world, making a case for an antediluvian civilization on this planet, that there was a high-tech civilization here. And this is this is what they left behind. So you go around Cuzco and you see the woman asking 5 soles to take a picture. I'm sure we paid her what she wanted. But I thought this was such a funny picture because here's another megalithic wall. You just see so many of them in Cuzco. You just kind of start losing track, and you focus on other things, such as this woman and her llama. And that's pretty funny. You just see these llamas all over there. Llamas are one of the only animals that spit. So don't get too close to them, nor get behind them, because they also buck. We didn't have to learn that the hard way, but we got the warning in time to prevent that. So it was so great traveling with Nassim and Brian and going to all these sites and getting the alternative perspective on what these were all about. At this particular site, there was another tour group and the tour guide was speaking in English. So I kind of, what was that you're talking about? And so they're saying this was where the Incans would grow their potatoes and they were doing experiments, genetic engineering, you could say. And then I just kind of go back over to Brian. He's like, no, this is a ritual ceremonial ground. And still to this day, the Peruvian people come to this Moray site. And this again is about 13,000 foot elevation. So you think if this is an experiment for growing potatoes, well, it's only at one elevation. Potatoes, of course, come from the Andes mountain range. And there are all kinds of potatoes in the Andes in all different colors and shapes and sizes. And if you were just growing them at 13,000 feet, you would pretty much get the same kind of potato that grows at that elevation. Well, we did a little experiment and we did some soundings down there. And I'll tell you, I've been to Greek and Roman amphitheaters in Europe, and the sound out of here was as good as any place that the Greek or Romans built. So they obviously had some really good technology when it came to sound and acoustics in these round circular areas. So moving on to one of the most famous portal cities, to one of the most famous towns, ancient towns, Agua Calientes, which does mean hot water, hot springs. And some people in our group went to the hot springs. It's kind of nice, but it's a modern town. It was built at the base of Machu Picchu to accommodate all the tourism. And that's the road up to Machu Picchu. They were planning on building a gondola, but that has not happened. This is not the road, but along there is the trail. The Inca Trail would come up from the river valley, but the Spanish never found this place. The Spanish never found Machu Picchu. It wasn't until an American archaeologist named Hiram Bingham followed the Inca road from another direction and discovered Machu Picchu. And this is what the site plan looks like. Brian Forrester said he's been coming here so often that in the early years, you could go anywhere you wanted. You could climb down all the terraces, walk through any of the buildings. But because Machu Picchu is the most visited archaeological site in South America, 1.5 visitors per year, that they keep you just on these marked trails now. But interestingly, that there is a central plaza in Machu Picchu and pyramidal type of terraces on both sides. And again, I was listening to another tour guide who was saying that there are three kinds of terraces. There are the agricultural terraces, which you can see on all the flanks of Machu Picchu. There are the ceremonial terraces, which surround the central plaza. And then there's also a terrace that holds up the city in the saddle of the mountain. So Machu Picchu only discovered in 1911, one of the newest archaeological sites in the world. The thatched roof has been added, but here you can see some of the agricultural terraces as we're about to start touring the city. So the reason that Machu Picchu was chosen as a site, as a sacred place, was because of the face in the mountain. Do you see it? Now you do. So with a little Photoshop enhancement, let me go back. Now you see it, right? So once you see it, you won't forget it. So this is the shaman sleeping on his back in the shadow of Machu Picchu. And yeah, it's You can see how they would revere this site because it would just hold so much power in this mountain here that they would just see it like you guys see it now and never forget it. But the Incans were also fascinated with the movement of the stars, with the whole celestial movement. And indeed, the Temple of the Sun in Machu Picchu has two windows where the summer and winter solstice sun goes right through those windows. Now, this could not be a coincidence, not at all. And so when we hiked the Inca Trail the next day, there was another Temple of the Sun with the exact same alignments for the summer solstice and the winter solstice. And in fact, they were even connected. You could see them. They're about 3 or 4 miles away or apart. And the sun would come through. So you can just kind of imagine the pomp and circumstance with the ceremonies that the Inca would have had on these very important days. We have our own holidays, Christmas and Easter, and many of them are based on the pagan holidays of Europeans. But the real holidays, the real New Year's Eve is Christmas Eve, is December 21st, 22nd, because that's when the sun comes back. So they would pray and worship the sun. This is a sundial at Machu Picchu called the Intihuatana, and it's still accurate to this day. And you could imagine how important it would be for prehistoric people to understand the movement and cycles of the earth, because if you were a nomadic tribe, for example, on the Great Plains of North America, we have the medicine wheels. And in my book, Sacred Places North America, I have many medicine wheel sites because they needed to keep track of the dates. If you don't know when to plant your seeds, when the rain is going to come, when your people need to migrate, well, you could have disastrous consequences. So the understanding of the movement of the sun, as well as the celestial objects that they observed, were vitally important. That's why the shaman, almost universally around the world, were the most important people, because they could make sense of all this. And now, through archaeoastronomy, we're playing catch up, and we're starting to learn how very sophisticated many of these Stone Age people really were. So in the central plaza, here are those 3 terrace styles. They still have ceremony where the descendants of the Inca, the Peruvian people of today, will go up there and have ceremony. And there are some llamas up there, and it's quite an amazing sight. But I have to say, my favorite was this place, Ollantaytambo. And this is where you actually catch the train to go up 25, 30 miles to get to Agua Calientes. But what I like about this place is that there's just ruins everywhere. And this is hiking up the other side of the mountain from the other Temple of the Sun, which I'll show you here in a second. And there's ruins everywhere, including in the town itself. So Brian Forrester said, this is the oldest inhabited town on earth. People have never left for thousands of years. And you could live in a megalithic foundation right there in Ollantaytambo. How cool would that be? Hey, party at my house. Live in the megaliths. Yeah. Bring some Inca Cola. That's a thing there. And so, yeah, you can still live there. People still do. And they even have their museum is built within a megalithic structure. Now, going across on the other side, this is the sacred side of Ollantaytambo. Often overlooked are these stones as you're approaching, because everybody's looking up the hill and all the megalithic buildings at the top there, and I'll show you that in a sec. But I was just blown away by these stones coming in, because it appears that they were softened at one point, that they were worked like a stonemason with a trowel, right? That was wet cement, and they were forming these blocks. And indeed, Nassim Haramein, who is a new physicist, was explaining that in the laboratory, one of the newest discoveries is using cold plasma to render stones soft. And in such a way, it didn't heat them up because it's cold plasma. And this would explain quite a bit. Now, we can look around the world and find the same thing, including here in Egypt. This is the quarry of one of the obelisks that had cracked and was left half excavated. And they left behind the clues of some kind of cold plasma building technique in Egypt as well. You can see what looked like trowel marks, or they were patting it down or forming the obelisk before it was even cut out of the living stone. So moving on to Pumapunku at Tiwanaku, just to show you these techniques as well, and I will go there in a second here. But again, Tiwanaku, also these trowel marks. And I just laid a pad of concrete on my ranch in Nevada a week ago, and I was using a trowel, and some places where I didn't quite get a clean line, I left some marks. So, in this modern age, we're still leaving our trowel marks on our cement formations. Did it myself. And so you get back into Ollantaytambo, these were all terraces. And I see this picture on Facebook all the time. People's like, hey, there's proof of giants. Look at how big these stairs are. Actually, the stairs are right there, and there's people walking up them. So don't make things more complicated than they have to be, right? And of course, Brian Forrester said, no, they're just very well built because these were royal terraces, and they were extremely well built because they were growing potatoes and other items for the royal family. So of course, everything had to be built very well. And here again, you have Nassim showing us these precisely fitted stones. No chisel marks. That's the other thing about these megaliths. You never see anybody chiseling, but you get these indentations and these little rollers, these knobs that stick out. And so Nassim was explaining that this would be a result of the cold fusion stones when they're more in a liquid form. As they were drying, the weight would sometimes push out those protuberances. And that made a lot of sense to me, because it is one of the mysteries of the megaliths. Why do they have these little knobs? So here you have one of the biggest megaliths in all of South America. They're 20-foot tall, 70-ton slabs. And these stones do have quarries, just as they do in Egypt and many other megalithic sites around the world. This particular quarry happens to be at the top of that mountain. And on the top of that mountain, find the exact same stones, including some that hadn't been excavated quite yet. But the thing is, the road, it's either dropped away or eroded. There's no road going to the top anymore. About 2/3 of the way down, the road starts, and there's a slab or two that they left along the way. But then they had to cross the river, and then they had to get it up another steep slope. Saying, why do you go through all this trouble? But again, I think it was to leave behind the legacy that they had the knowledge to build this way, and we are still playing catch up. So moving on to Tiwanaku. This was in the museum there. They're talking about how the royalty of the pre-Inca in Tiwanaku and Pumapunku, featured many times on Ancient Aliens and shows like that, and I've been on a couple episodes. We're talking about these elongated skulls, and that the royalty would do cranial deformation to copy the look of someone with elongated skulls. They went to quite a bit of effort to use cranial deformation so they could look like this. But here's the thing. You can have all the bandages and boards and all the different ways that you could shape the cranium. But what you can't do is add mass. You cannot add this big section, this big bulb that sticks out of the back of the head. These craniums are 30% larger than human skulls. And faintly behind this skull, I guess you can't really see it, but a human skull is only about that big. So you can see clearly how much larger these elongated skulls are. And these illustrations should point it out very clearly that not only do they have 30 to 35% larger cranial capacity, but 30% larger eye sockets, 30% larger stem cell where the spinal cord reaches the brain. And they have no central suture. That is the crack that all of us humans have that go right up the forehead. They're devoid. So they're very human-like. And some of them are even preserved with red hair and skin on them. Got a red head in the back. There we go. There's a descendant. You'll sign autographs afterwards, won't you? Yeah. That you have, they're very human-like. So we were just talking about it at our dinner table tonight. Do you think they're Anunnaki? Well, I don't know. I just know that they're not quite like us. But down in Peru, they're cool with it. They've got whole museums with these elongated skulls. Here in North America, they would just find these in the mound sites. And I think on Friday, we might be heading out to Cahokia, this great mound site right near here. And they would find relics in the mound sites throughout North America. Smithsonian would just show up and flip their badge like the FBI will take over here. And they would take all the bones and the artifacts. And I have a whole account of it in my book, Beyond Esoteric, in the back there, of a dig not too far from where I grew up. In fact, not too far from here either, in Lake Delavan, Wisconsin, where they were doing everything by the book and excavating these giant bones. You guys think I'm tall? They'd be up to the ceiling. I'm not kidding you. They would be standing as tall as that beam. And the Smithsonian came and confiscated all the bones and relics. And they said, well, we want to follow up and see what you guys come up with. And they did. And Smithsonian's like, we don't know what you're talking about. We don't have your bones. So that's what's called Smithsonian Gate in this country, that they were just throwing them into the Atlantic. Just get them out of here, out of sight, out of mind. We don't want to talk about these giants. Why? Well, it upsets the apple cart, doesn't it? It does rewrite history as we know it in this country. But in South America, they're cool with it. And they're cool with having extraterrestrial visitations. And this is something that we heard regularly on the trip, that they would come out of Lake Titicaca itself is supposed to be the home of the Great White Brotherhood. And I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. And they would come down and visit. They weren't always the elongated skulls. They weren't always giants. But the fact that the South Americans were pretty open to the whole idea just let them, they're much more open to this idea. So this was another little museum, just a tiny little town in the Sacred Valley. Here's the discoverer. His name is Renato Rilenque, and he named it the Waikwi, which is basically gray alien. He thought they were those gray aliens we see so much in the media. And so here is the Waikwi skull on exhibit. And this little guy was ritually sacrificed. It was just a toddler, really. And you can see how big the skull is. Look at this. The cranium is the same size as the torso. So the head was just so huge. And when it was only about 1 or 2 years old, someone hit it really hard in the back of the head, and you can see the cracks. That's not a sacral suture. That is a crack from being sacrificed. And all of these, here's another example of mummified giants, these elongated heads, but this again being a small infant, but were all buried in the royal tombs. So they obviously gave them preferential treatment where they were going to be buried with the royalty of the Inca. Here's Lake Titicaca. This is the largest alpine lake in the world. This was an ancient volcanic caldera that rose up, presumably during the last polar shift. And in Lake Titicaca is the only example of seahorses that live in fresh water. Now, seahorses only live in the sea. So it's presumed that at one time, Lake Titicaca was salt water, and that as the water has slowly changed to fresh water, they were able to survive. This is another high elevation location, 12,506 feet above sea level. I was thinking when I took this picture, wow, that's probably the highest elevation beach I've ever seen. It's way up there. I'm a big skier. I love to go up. If you get to 12,500 feet, I'll tell you, there are very few ski resorts in North America you can even get that high. Breckenridge has the highest chairlift in the country, and it's at 13,000 feet. And that's at the top of the mountain. This is at lake level. It's surrounded by mountains. The Andes Mountains are the second highest mountain range after the Himalaya. So here's these seahorses found there. And then all these strange sites around Lake Titicaca, including this doorway of Amaru Meru. And I'm reading in The Lonely Planet as we're getting there. It says, wow, in The Lonely Planet, which is kind of the mainstream media of tour guides, oh, people go disappearing here. It says, yeah, there was a whole group of Italians and several of them went missing. It's right there in The Lonely Planet. Like, okay, well, we better be careful here. But this is a false door. And that's really interesting. You see these false doors quite a bit. They're just carved into the rock, but going nowhere. Just this false door and this whole facade in this kind of Dr. Seuss landscape of rocks there, which are really fascinating. So looking at Bolivia from above, there's Lake Titicaca, this giant lake, which is way up there in the sky. And you can see how Bolivia goes down into the Amazon rainforest, but up on the plateau there is the Altiplano, high altitude desert. On the shores of Lake Titicaca, they're having a bit of a resurgence of Incan pride. So you see a lot of these kind of statues all over the place. But look at Lake Titicaca. You can't even see the other side. Just way off in the distance over here, some mountains. It's a huge lake, about 100 miles long and about 40 feet wide. This really cute little cozy town called Copacabana. It's hard to leave. It was so chill and mellow, and you could go to the beach and ayahuasca ceremonies. And Bolivian people are really cool, just very chill people. Yeah, they're cool with anything. Just like a lot of towns like in Thailand. Yeah, you got money, you want to buy something? Oh, go ahead, knock yourself out. And so you see these the reed boats. So this was a reproduction of a sacred Incan boat that would come out here to the island of the sun on Lake Titicaca. This is the emergence point of the Incan people, they believe, coming up out of the lake through this site. And way off in the distance here, this is the island of the moon. So the other thing with the Incans, they would always have a masculine site and then a feminine site. And this island of the moon being one of the feminine sites and showing a lot of curves and female type configurations. Beautiful native culture all around Lake Titicaca. Also on the shore of Lake Titicaca is Tiwanaku, the one site that all archaeologists agree is pre-Incan. The most notable structure is the Sun Gate in Tiwanaku, carved from a single massive slab of andesite stone, which is one of the hardest stones to carve from. And almost very recently, an earthquake cracked it. There are old illustrations of the Sun Gate showing it without that crack. In Tiwanaku is also the semi-subterranean temple at Tiwanaku, a very enigmatic site. And I think one of these might have a video. Or maybe
here we are in the.
Was it running? Oh, there it goes. So here's. Okay, I'll navigate. I'll narrate.
One of the most famous and photographed locations.
It's a subterranean temple
and political.
But look at the heads in there.
With these very enigmatic faces, where all but 6 are originals. Some look like skulls. Some look like aliens with bug eyes. Maybe they were the priestly caste. Maybe they were royalty. Maybe they were people that lived here, that worshipped here. Or maybe they were something altogether different. It appears these white ones are the artificial ones, where all the rest
have these headgear.
Are originals.
Now notice the headgear. See it on almost every one of them.
Just above. Now, when this temple was discovered, these walls were all in a jumbled mess, including these heads. And some archaeologists, like Brian Forrester, think that it was assembled in a different way than it was originally, and therefore thinks that perhaps this particular site shouldn't be represented in the way it was. But what's the alternative? Leaving it in a jumbled mess, or giving us an opportunity to see it in its semi-reconstructed state? Now, this was also the location where they found the Pachamama monolith, which is now in the museum, 7.3 meters tall. And these monoliths were also found here and remain here. See the serpent going up the side and the hands holding ritual objects and the long ears, similar to Easter Island. Quite a fascinating sight. The semi-subterranean temple at Tiwanaku.
So maybe I just gave it away, but then you'll find in, in Pumapunku, also this megalithic site right next to Tiwanaku, with these giant slabs. This was originally surveyed by George Squire, who did all the surveys in North America of the mound sites. You might have seen his engravings of the mound sites, and he went down to Tiwanaku, and here he is doing some measurements. Tiwanaku has these massive slabs. It's like some major earth catastrophe. A kid with a Lego set just flipped it up and sent these pieces flying. But they are some of the most precisely fit. Each one of these H blocks is unique in its own way. Now, some people think that maybe this is poured concrete. Others say it was carved. But these H blocks are one of the big mysteries, as well as some of these indented into the hard andesite rocks, puzzling scientists. We were putting Pumapunku together, you get something like this, some kind of big megalithic temple. And some of these slabs have these very famous T-joints connecting it that would have been poured metal that hardened to keep those T-joints together. Now, in the town right next to the ruins, there's an old church from the 16th century, and they would have pulled these statues out of the Tiwanaku site. Here you see the headgear again, the long ears. This is that Pachamama statue in the museum at Tiwanaku that got pulled out of the semi-subterranean temple. Again, stylized long ears, headgear, these big bulbous eyes. And what does that look like? Just like the statuary on Easter Island. Elongated ears, big bulbous eyes, wearing the headgear. And it was Thor Heyerdahl who wrote the book Kon-Tiki and did an expedition from South America in a reed boat made from all organic reeds that they built in the same way the Inca would. And he sailed all the way to French Polynesia. It's a really fascinating book. And they also made a movie out of it called Kon-Tiki. And I would agree with Thor Heyerdahl that the culture of South America went out to influence Easter Island and indeed the rest of the South Pacific, where we find the tiki sculptures that are so iconic and famous. This is the biggest of the monoliths, called the Bennett monolith. Again, headgear, elongated ears, big bulbous eyes. And same with this one. So these were builders. They do appear to be of a different race. Perhaps these elongateds, they were wearing the headgear to disguise their big elongated heads. Many people think that the Vatican wear those big hats to disguise their bulbous heads. Kind of interesting. There it is again. So moving on into La Paz, they have this famous witches market. Hey, where else can you find a freeze-dried llama fetus or voodoo dolls for your potions and elixirs but the witches market? And I think I got one of these cool little maps there and some other stuff. And then you have this, for 35 cents, you can ride the gondolas throughout La Paz, because you can see how densely populated this city is. It's just in this really deep valley, and it's so overpopulated that the roads are just choked full. So the ski company that does gondolas and high-speed chairlifts called Doppelmayr came in and got the bid to put in a whole system of these gondolas that you can ride for 35 cents. So moving all over La Paz, that was quite a fun way to get around. Here is the Salar de Uyuni. It's the largest salt flat in the world. It's so pure, you can just scoop it up, put it in your mouth, eat some salt. And they have all these islands out there. It's really cool. And as well as hot springs and cold springs, but these islands of cactus we drove out to on a tour. I didn't want to take the car I bought in South America because the salt can be very corrosive, but sold it 2 months later. It wouldn't have mattered. So out on the Salar de Uyuni, surprise around every corner. There's the old graveyard of trains. They used to mine salt and also silver near there. And they do the Dakar road race because it got too dangerous to drive the cars across Africa. So they moved it here to Bolivia. Moving down across the border. Now we're going to start heading south, way south. And this is going to lead into Antarctica. But Argentina has a massive salt flat. Here is 5,121 kilometers to Ushuaia. But before we went there, I have also this fascination with the Nazis at the end of World War II, escaping to South America. There's a great series on the History Channel called Hunting Hitler, which featured the La Falda Hotel. So I went and did the tour of the hotel, and fortunately my tour guide was a real fluent English speaker. And at the end I said, you really think Hitler escaped? He goes, oh, I don't have to think it. I know it. I said, how do you know it? says, well, right here in town, there's this older woman who was a chambermaid at the Eden Hotel when she was a teenager. And she remembers Adolf and his wife, Eva Braun. They did get married, and their dog, Blondie, even the German Shepherd, made it over in a U-boat when they were escaping. And I'm working on a new book about some of that to be announced at a later date. But many, apart from the fugitive Hitler coming to the Eden Hotel, hosted many other luminaries, including Che Guerrero, you can see there, and even Albert Einstein. This is all pre-World War II, of course, in Germany. They were very wealthy. They brought a lot of that wealth to South America. There was a joke that I heard there because in Chile and Argentina, they've basically exterminated all the Native American population, unlike Peru and Bolivia, which still have a huge amount of Native people and culture intact, but not so much in Chile and Argentina. So the joke was they're doing a little soul searching. I think, who are we as Argentinians? And most of them are from Southern Europe. So Greeks and Italians, Spanish, of course, Portuguese. So the joke was Argentinians today are Italians who speak Spanish, but they wish that they were as rich as the Germans because the Germans have all the money down there. And partly because Hitler took it with him. His money man, Martin Bormann, kept popping up all over the place, and they got the loot out. So this document dated September 17th, 1945, after the war, mentions that Hitler would be hiding out in Argentina, and this TV series called Hunting Hitler describes many of these different places, including his close relationship between Hitler and the Eichhorns, and there they all are. Not too far away from La Falda is one of the most famous UFO sites in South America. And it's the Cerro Uritorco mountain right here. You can see, and there's all these kiosks with aliens and stuff. We're like, all right, we found the right place here. We did a little sky watch that night, but didn't see anything. So I came back, and my good friend David Hatcher Childress, he's one of the stars on Ancient Aliens. I was telling him that, yeah, we're looking for UFOs, man. The Lonely Planet said they were all over the place. Like, those aren't UFOs, Brad. Those are Nazi craft. They have a big base in the mountain. They're testing their stuff out of there. I think he's right. Yeah, because real UFOs do not leave burn marks in the ground. Real UFOs don't have chemtrails sometimes following them. Those are prototypes. They're backward engineering them. So further south, going down towards San Carlos de Bariloche, this was in the TV series Hunting Hitler. This is as close as you can get to the Analco house where Hitler lived. And he had a seaplane. So if the authorities were ever moving in on him, they could take the seaplane up, cross the Andes Mountains. They're in another country. Then they're in Chile. Isn't it interesting that the U.S. government continued to depose democratically elected leaders in Argentina and Chile throughout the 1940s? Eva Perón, her husband, total fascist. In Chile, it was Pinochet who deposed a democratically elected leader to install this dictator. And then in Argentina, during the Dirty War, that's where the current Pope was from. He's Argentinian, and he sided with the bad guys. He turned in a couple of his fellow priests who were trying to save people. And that Dirty War was really dirty. They were just throwing people out of helicopters. If you were posting on social media things you shouldn't post, well, of course it wasn't invented then, but saying things you shouldn't have said, you'd just be disappeared. So there's this history of fascism in Chile and Argentina. And dare I say, it is because they were protecting the Fourth Reich. And I'll get into a little bit of that in Argentina as well. So here's San Carlos de Bariloche. I've been to Germany several times. Going here was like stepping into a Bavarian town, very wealthy for Argentinian standards, and right on the shores of the lake. It looked just like southern Bavaria. Beautiful place. So as we're getting here close to the end of this presentation, just wanted to bring up the Patagonian giants. So some of the biggest humans that ever lived on Earth that were recorded were down here at the southern tip of South America. So this was a map that Magellan drew, and he was the first one to get through the Magellan Straits in 1521. So they just had their 500th anniversary of Magellan discovering the passage to the Pacific. Now you can see on his map, he thought that Terra del Fuego just was part of the southern continent. I'm going to get into that in Antarctica here in a second, but couple more examples of some of these Patagonian giants. So they're in one of the most inhospitable places in the world, and they're basically running around with just a loincloth or animal hides, pretty much naked. And you can see how much bigger they are than the Europeans that were coming there. And the chronicler, the historian on the Magellan ship, was saying that these giants were so tall that the Europeans only reached their waist. So clearly some kind of other type of people living down there. Once again, giants. Not sure if they're just like those elongated. They did not appear to be, but they're all gone. They are extinct.
We are coming into Port
I'll
Lockroy
show you this real quick.
under these amazingly beautiful, majestic.
So then I got on a sailboat for 26 days.
Here are a bunch of whales.
You saw some whales.
Frolicking and feeding. Flashing us some whales. Tails.
Can't see this at the end. It's got 45 minutes here. But look at this. There were all these professional photographers on my boat, and I'm the only one with my iPhone just to capture this. And a whole school or a whole pod of whales, which I posted this video on Facebook, and one of my naturalist friends said that these were the right whales. Right whales were almost hunted to extinction, just like the blue whales. And look,
oh boy.
The other ones, you don't see them again, but the bull, the male of the pod, he comes directly at us.
Oh man. Ho ho ho. Right under.
They go swimming right under our boat.
You did that? I did.
This is the my home for 26 days.
Where'd they go?
The Antarctica
That's
voyage.
a weird feeling.
Called Chief One.
Hope it's not Moby Dick.
They stayed under. We didn't see them again, but they released a bunch of bubbles.
Amazing.
On the other side of the boat, you'll see come up here. There are the bubbles.
Amazing.
Yeah, so the right whales were given that name because they died the right way. They actually floated to the surface, and it was much easier for the whalers to capture them and pull them aboard. So coming down to the White Continent, this is the Palmer Peninsula here, and Ushuaia and Terra del Fuego just right here. And then so we explored this whole region. These are some recent maps of Antarctica, one showing the elevation. The polar plateau in eastern Antarctica is over 2 miles deep. It is the tallest elevation continent in the world. And then this other map came up, It was a heat map that NASA had just released 5 years ago showing the Palmer Peninsula in red and a lot of evidence of melting on Antarctica, which I'll show you some other images. But amazingly, also these blue areas showing areas where there is snow accumulation, where there is a cooling effect. And I suppose Mother Nature, in her infinite wisdom, this is the reason why you don't have places like Miami Beach underwater right now. And these land masses of Antarctica, this is the most amount of trapped fresh water in the form of the locked in ice. Yes, indeed. If this were to melt, it would be like a glass of water with ice cubes in it. And you drop a couple more ice cubes in it, of course, it's going to overflow. So if Antarctica were to fully melt, yeah, we would have catastrophic flooding on our coastal regions. Now, I was just living in Santa Cruz and they have the famous boardwalk there for 100 years. No change in water, no change at all. So down in the Southern Ocean, which National Geographic just said is now officially the 5th ocean of the world, because you have the colder fresh water migrating north and then the upwelling of the southern currents. That's why the Southern Ocean is so vitally important to the planet, because it really contains so many animal species and so much diversity. Even though it's such a cold climate, it's able to sustain so much life. And there was another ship that was going down there to go scuba diving in Antarctica under the ice and shipwrecks. And one day we went aboard and they showed us a bunch of their videos, and it was like a coral reef. It was colorful. It was creatures crawling around. It was fish life all over the place. They weren't as colorful fish as you would find in a coral reef, but nonetheless, quite dramatic how much life is down there. So because Antarctica is so rich in resources, many countries have made claim, this being Argentina. Now, none of these claims are recognized. That's the trade-off with the Antarctic Treaty. They say, okay, well, yeah, you can make your claims, you can put your bases there, but you can't do any military training, or you have to just leave it as a natural reserve. And in fact, because no country makes claim to Antarctica, it's like a world preserve. And that is thanks to the Antarctica Treaty, one of the longest standing treaties, fully ratified in 1961, that makes the whole continent a natural reserve. So part of my talk on Antarctica, I do try to dispel many myths. And I listen to anything I can, other interviews all about it all the time, because oh, you can't go there. It's totally off limits. Like, dude, I got pictures on my cell phone. You want me to send them to you? Of course you can go there. And here are some pictures of of this beautiful landscape down there. And it's stark. It's covered in ice. 99% of the land is covered in ice. But there are these rock outcroppings. This is Port Lockroy, which was a spy station in World War II against the Nazis in New Schwabenland. I'll get to that in a little bit. And it's just this incredible white landscape with all these really interesting features that I learned about when I was down there. For example, 4 South Poles. You think, oh, South Pole, 1 pole? Nope. You got the geographic South Pole. That's the bottom of the rotating top. But you also have the geomagnetic pole. And this is where a lot of the Aurora Borealis, but down there, they're Aurora Australis, the Southern Lights. The South Magnetic Pole, which is now off the continent. Both of the magnetic poles are racing away from the actual pole itself, including our North Pole, which had normally been in the northern Hudson Bay area. Now it is racing across the Arctic Ocean towards Siberia. And I'll show you the consequences of what that could mean if we were to have a pole shift here in a bit. And then you have the pole of maximum inaccessibility, the most remote place on planet Earth on the landmass, but in the ocean is Point Nemo. And you can see from this perspective that we really live on an ocean planet. Earth is covered in 71% ocean. It's only 29% landmass. We don't really experience that because we're always on land. But in looking at this perspective of the southern hemisphere, you can barely see any land masses. Here's us on the Chief 1 sailboat entering Deception Island. And this is a very narrow passage, and there is submerged rocks there that have taken down a couple shipwrecks. And inside Deception Island, it is an active volcanic caldera. We went to an old whaling station, and there are Norwegian names on the gravestones. Still, everything stays very well preserved in Antarctica. Nothing really erodes or rots down there because it's usually so cold. Yes, and they come from outer space, and you have many of the meteorites that land. Well, they land all over the planet because Antarctica is such an isolated place covered in snow. They can find them a lot easier. So it's a huge meteorite collector, and the best place to look for them. They go down there basically wearing gloves, and when they do take these out, it's a very intricate process to pull these rocks out every summer. And the most famous one was this microscopic life from Mars found in a meteorite on the polar plateau of East Antarctica. The news media made a big issue out of these microbes from another planet. Oh no, Mars attacks with microscopic bacteria life. But what I find fascinating is this whole under system underneath Antarctica, because there are over 150 subglacial lakes, and all of them are interconnected via ice rivers that eventually flow out to the sea. Because Antarctica is the most volcanically active continent of the world, it has the propensity to create these giant domes underneath the ice, which could harbor all kind of life as we know it or don't know it. And undiscovered species of life could live down there. So underneath is Lake Vostok, one of the top 10 largest freshwater lakes in the world that nobody's even heard of or could even find it. Well, you guys can, now that you've seen this. It was originally discovered from satellite images like this, where they said, hey, there must be something down there. And indeed, 2.2 miles underneath the ice, the Russians finally bored through and got a water sample and found that there was some bacterial life that they think came off of fish of species as yet discovered. So here are the southern lights called Aurora Australis. Australia was really terra incognita. I do another talk about the maps of Antarctica centuries before it was discovered in 1821 by whalers who read about Captain Cook going down there and seeing a huge abundance of seals and whales. And that's what largely almost drove several species to extinction. And to this day, the whale population has not rebounded. There's still a fraction of how many were there before 1821. The seal population, on the other hand, has rebounded. They're pretty much back to the levels that the environment can sustain. Now, seen from above, these southern lights are much like our northern lights. In fact, these lights are year-round. You just don't see them in the daytime when the the southern hemisphere below the Antarctic Circle has 24 hours of daylight during the summer solstice. Of course, the seasons are opposite down there, and these southern lights can't be seen in the daylight, but so few people live down there in the winter, which is right now down there. It's only 1,000 people on the whole continent. It's the 5th largest continent of the world. There's only 1,000 people there right now. So people say this planet is so overpopulated. Well, I just showed you that picture of Point Nemo and Antarctica being so sparsely populated. Now it's rough living down there. It was a rough trip down there. I threw up for 3 days on the rough Drake Passage going in, but it's the barrier to entry to go there. And that's why so few people do. Only about 35,000 people a year even make it there. And then the people that live here on the bases, we got a chance to go to 6 of these 60 scientific stations and to see the Palmer base, which is all scientific research. Normally they don't let people come aboard, but because we had 3 Americans on our ship, I was actually the one in charge of trying to get us permission to come ashore. I said, hey, we're tax-paying Americans. You got to let us come aboard. We're paying for you guys. And they said, oh, okay, all right. And they let us come aboard and come ashore and check it out. And so the 23 nations that have scientific stations down there are all working with the Antarctica Treaty. And that is, you can't leave anything behind. And so one of the bases we went to is now a Ukrainian base, is the Vernansky base. And that was given over to them by the British for £1 That's what they bought it for. The British were basically, they would have had to take everything out of there. But then the Ukrainians said, no, we'll set up a base. And the bar in the Vernansky base is called the Faraday Bar, named after the British scientist Faraday. And they have that £1 in the bar, and it's the southernmost bar in the world. And they make their own vodka, and boy, they're fun people to party with. It's just such a shame what's going on in Ukraine right now. And I wonder if the base is even still operating with all that's going on. But so many weird things going on down there. So my colleague, Dr. Michael Sala, he gave me a lot of pointers, tips, and I said, what's weird going on down there, Michael? He said, well, how about this? These cosmic rays are detected coming out of the Earth. Usually cosmic rays only come down on the Earth, but in Antarctica lo and behold, around the South Pole, the cosmic rays are coming out. Maybe there's a hole down there or something. I'll talk about that in a sec. But I thought this was kind of funny. They told me in the research station, they all like to watch The Thing. You get some new crop of people coming in. They said, oh, first movie you're going to watch is The Thing. And I have to say that sometimes life imitates art. And of course, the premise of the movie is they find this giant mothership craft under the ice and some alien comes back to life. All these names are part of Antarctica. They just put their the site of where the UFO was located here, and then the base. This happens to be Dronning Maud Land, which is New Schwabenland, the claim of the Germans. And I'll get to that in a second. And the reason I put this in there is because to show you that sometimes Hollywood likes to seed their movies with a little bit of truth serum. But so I'm going to go through some more just scientific things and items that I discovered down there. Antarctica being part of the supercontinent Gondwanaland or Pangaea. And you can see here how certain animals in the fossil species have been found in Antarctica that match up to Australia, that match up to India, that match up to Africa and South America. So these continents must have been connected at one time to have these animals in the fossil record. This would be the result if those poles continue to move. And California, might be on the verge of this big, massive ice sheet, as well as Australia, which would leave Antarctica to thaw out. And what will we find under the ice? Well, Antarctica is the highest altitude continent of the Earth and also one of the driest. When I was in Ushuaia, I was invited to a New Year's Eve party at the Ushuaia Yacht Club, and I talked to a bunch of sea captains. One of them told me about this seal, and he said, this seal is over 3,000 years old, yet it does not decompose because it's so cold down there. And a lot of scientists will come and observe this old animal that's still laying there in the dry valleys near the Ross Ice Shelf. And dinosaurs, some species only found in Antarctica, such as this one that kind of looks like a cross between a salamander and an alligator. And it was found in East Antarctica right there. Now, I talked to this guy at length. He studies the ice fish, which are quite unique. They're only found in Antarctica. They are members of the ice fish family that have no hemoglobin. They're pretty much transparent fish, and they're able to live under the ice in sub-freezing water. And they're a keystone species for the seal population. And of course, the penguins feed on the ice fish here. So the head of the Antarctica Palmer Base, he told me, take a picture of this painting that was created in the 1980s. And it was in the galley in the Palmer Base. And he said, now look out over here. And this is it. So this island has just emerged in the last 15 years. It had a land bridge of ice that collapsed, and it is called Pie Island because it collapsed on Pi Day, which is in mid-March. So there are changes in the climate as well as the animal species, including the penguins. These colonies of warmer weather penguins, the chinstrap and the gentoo, are on the increase because they're invading into the feeding grounds of the Adelie penguins, which are declining rapidly. Now, here's how, it's a good example of how the animals down there have no fear of humans. Here's me and my little iPhone coming right up to a mother and a chick, and she's kind of like, hey man, you're blocking my view. She didn't hiss, she didn't run away. It's just, it's really surprising to see, as I showed you with the whales swimming under the boat, the animals having no fear at all of humans. The race to the South Pole was a matter of 35 days. This is Roald Amundsen on the left. He just got there first. The British party did not use dog sleds. All 5 of them died, and their bodies are still out there on the Ross Ice Shelf, while Roald Amundsen and his crew made it back to their ship and made it back safely. So this is when I get into the speculation portion. This is what usually people at the UFO conferences like to hear, including this massive hole under the ice, which I'm finding more and more confirming information that there is a massive hole just 1 degree from the South Pole. Now, my colleague Eric Hecker, he's like, no, I lived at South Pole for a year. I never heard of it. There's no hole there. Well, you wouldn't know, just like you would know if there was some kind of a military installation 25 miles from here and you couldn't go anywhere near it. You don't know what you can't see. So I'm keeping an open mind on this, but finding more and more information, including these satellite images, which show this massive gaping hole several miles across. So this whistleblower that Linda Moulton Howe interviewed, named Brian S., this was his map. He saw silver discs over the Beardmore Glacier, these missing scientists for a week. Now, how do you survive outside of your camp for a week? And when they finally showed up again, they were all ashen-faced and absolutely refused to talk anything about what they saw. So something is happening down there. And I think the Nazis knew this from the early days. This is actually a map of the Third Reich of New Schwabenland, where they went in 1938, 1939. This is the badge. And you'll notice the oak leaves. Now, the oak leaves are very significant because they clearly reveal the Thule Society fraternity. This is one of the secret societies of the Third Reich. And the Third Reich was the only government in the modern age that openly supported occult secret societies such as the Thule Society, where many of the high-ranking Nazis came out of there. Then you had the Vril Society, where they were receiving telepathic transmissions of some of the big ships. And the German scientists started back when engineering this stuff. And then you had the Anunnaki Society, which was looking into the ancestral homelands of the Germans. And this gave rise to their whole notion of a master race, of an inner Earth civilization. They were doing excavations and expeditions on the Tibetan plateau, looking for Shambhala and Agartha and here in Antarctica. And I think they found something. So this was interesting. I'm poring over maps, looking at all the maps I can. I'm a cartographer myself. I draw maps. I love maps. I read maps. Notice how you read a map, but it's really just lines and just names. Here's that drowning Maudland, just like in the movie The Thing. This is where they found something here at the Conan base. Now that Neumeier base, you notice this is the old West German flag. The Germans never left. They may have lost World War II, but they never left this portion of Antarctica. And why? Because I think they found this craft under the ice. Now the intelligence agency, the NSA, no such agency, they had a nickname for three massive motherships. They called them the Nina, Pinta, and Santa Maria, like Columbus's first three ships. I would propose this is one of them. Because in 2013, they were doing some kind of excavation here. There's an entrance here. This is an airstrip with snowmobile tracks, and they dug this thing out. If you look at it today, it's like that. It's like tent poles placed over it, but it's some kind of grill. And I love it when I can get matching data points. And the Farsight Institute, who has the remote viewers, they targeted this site, and you could see the GPS coordinates. This is how remote viewers do it. They'll do a 5-sided blind of 5 different remote viewers. They all went down there and they said, it's some kind of massive craft. Okay. And for very, very tall beings as well. It's defunct. It hasn't flown in perhaps 100,000, maybe 1 million years, but it's down there. I think this is one of the 3. Here's some other possibilities. I've been on a couple other History Channel show, and Brad Olsen says that there's UFOs in Antarctica, and he points to this. I say it's a possibility, okay? You get quoted out of context in a lot of these shows. What can you do? And pyramids sticking through, but are they pyramids? So there are tour groups that I've spoken to, because I had some producers come up to me after some of my talks when I contacted the desk, say, hey man, we'll finance it. Let's go down there. Let's film. Sure. So I talked to a travel company. You can travel there. If you got enough money, you can go. And then, so I'm showing them all my pictures and say, hey, do you guys ever fly here? He goes, oh, we fly over it all the time. I said, well, what do you think it is? And he said, it's a nun attack. So what's a nun attack? It's just an attractive mountain. I said, but have you ever landed there? Did you ever climb it or take any samples? No. We just fly over it. Well, so I think the jury's still out on that one. Well, 3 locations with pyramids, and you can see them in this collage on the left, including the one near the water. And this was in Eric Hecker. We were at a conference about a year ago in Vegas. We're going over a lot of our material. Pull out the map. I go, look at this, Eric. It's got a pyramid right there in the McMurdo Sound. It's like, I never noticed that. Well, there it is on your map. So this might be one, and then another one directly south of New Zealand in a place called Oats Land. So this I kind of also debunked, that there was all these Fitbit recordings of people. And the guy I talked to with the Antarctica travel group, he said, no, well, yeah, they were part of our group. They landed here. We have a base camp on the Union Glacier, and we did like a triathlon, and that's what they picked up. So sometimes these do have simple explanations. But one thing is true, a lot of elite were going down there. I think you guys probably heard this from John Kerry on election day. You think he might have been trying to get his candidate in office. Buzz Aldrin, who had this really cryptic tweet that says, "We have seen the face of danger, of evil, and we're all in danger." You get Patriarch Krill, old guy, King Carlos of Spain. And then here's Prince William leaving from the South Bay Station, going 1 degree north, I think, to go see the hole in the ice. Otherwise, there's nothing out there. Where are you going cross-country skiing, Prince William? Prince Harry, to nowhere. And they call it the Illuminati Disneyland. And this might be one of the Nina Pinta Santa Maria. I can't confirm. Photoshop is incredible too. Maybe they're fake. I don't know. But they're both apparently, all three of them are 3 miles across. And as for the potential of an alien base, there are these entrances. This is also in New Schwabenland, in the German claim. This one's quite clear. You could fly a plane in there. It's a lot bigger than it looks. And there's two of them. There's two of them within a couple miles of each other, presumably connecting to the same base. And I come across all these images of this supposedly Admiral Byrd, another one finding this giant dome under the ice. I don't know. I just know that there's a lot of weirdness down there. And I do know that Google Earth is covering stuff up. Like if you were to look for that hole under the ice, you won't find it. But what you will find is a real sloppy layer like that. Well, we're not going to show you what's here. But then they show us other things that are there. And this one on the bottom, it's like 4-sided pyramids with steps up the middle. And the other one is some kind of symmetrical cityscape. I don't know. I would go back there. I'd go check it out. So you got 2 continental land masses connected by the polar ice. This is the map of Germany. So right up through the mid-Atlantic ridge is another one of these fault lines with a lot of volcanoes. And I do believe that's one of the reasons why the Germans chose this area. There's that map of Magellan again. And they believed for a long time, since Magellan went through in 1521, all the way until 1821, so 300 years, that Terra del Fuego connected to the southern continent of Antarctica. And then this Bache map from the 18th century depicts Antarctica with a water channel flowing right through it. And you think, oh, well, guess they didn't get it right. Well, maybe they did get it right, because if you take the ice off of Antarctica, that's what the continent looks like. It is very two distinct land masses. This is Western Antarctica. This is Eastern Antarctica. This being New Schwabenland with a giant fjord hundreds of miles going inland. So I think the Germans sailed their U-boats up into their base there in New Schwabenland as well. This is the Phineas map of 1531, which shows Antarctica, what it would look like with the ice pack on top, remarkably similar, as well as another version of Antarctica without the ice. Now, Corey Good says he witnessed some of these excavations. Let's just take it with a grain of salt. But he said they're pulling out megafauna, such as a woolly mammoth, megalithic buildings, and then these pre-Adamite figures, saying that there is this interplanetary corporate conglomerate there. Remote viewers have also seen these under ice cities, and the antenna, L-tannin antenna, photographed on the seafloor. This was really interesting in 1964. So there are ET artifacts down there. The South Sandwich Islands are some of the most remote in the world. This is my last little segment here. The desolate southern Thule Island at the very bottom of the map here, one of the most remote locations in the world. It would be located right there. You see South America and Antarctica. And this is where the Falkland Wars was fought, not just in the Falkland Islands, but also in the South Sandwich Islands. And actually the surrender papers were signed right here on the Falkland Islands, the South Thule Island. You can see that base there. Here's another picture of it. It's called the Corbetta Uruguay Station on Southern Thule Island. And why did they surrender here? 8 scientists put up a white flag and gave themselves up. And speculation exists that Operation Keyhole of the Brits was to secure a frozen ET underground base containing the black goo. This is a new item in conspiracy research that keeps coming up. The black goo was stored in South Thule Island. Just 2 more minutes. And it's presumed that the whole Falkland Wars was just a cover to get down to South Thule Island to get the black goo and stored in a cave there. And now this black goo is intelligent. It's living. It's various forms. It has a sentient nature to it. And control of the black goo may have been what the Falkland Wars was all about, because they took this back to the UK and tried to backward engineer it, study it. It got loose. It wreaked havoc. All these scientists at the Marconi laboratories died mysteriously. And it might be that this black goo has got itself out because it can self-organize. Kind of reminds me of graphene oxide and even some of the nanobots. So this is kind of the nasty stuff going on down there. I showed you that video already. And with that, I'll say thank you very much for coming out.
Are you okay to take a couple questions?
Yeah, for sure.
If anybody has any questions for Brad, you can just come line up right here and ask them if you'd like. I'm going to ask the first one.
All right.
Can you tell us about Operation Tiburon? Is that how I pronounce it?
Yeah, that was showed briefly the British base, Tamerlan. It was the British spying on the Nazis in New Schwabenland. And we went to a couple of their bases. Some of them are just museums. Don't even put a lock on the door, and you're walking right into 1940 base, and there's cans of food on the wall and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm going to get into that in my next book on Antarctica.
And what about, have you heard about them discovering possibly, like, what they claimed to see was possibly reverse engineered UFOs, reptilian bases, stuff like that? Have you heard of that?
Heard of it, but
Yeah.
The other thing about Antarctica, it's so huge. The distances are very vast. So where I went was just a little sliver of the Palmer Peninsula. To go inland is very expensive because you have to bring all your supplies. Maybe one of those 3 motherships, Nina Pinta or Santa Maria.
All right. Well, sign me up for the next trip.
All right. You and maybe half the room. Hi.
Hi, I was curious, the Pachamama statue and those others found in that region, have they been compared to what's been found in Göbekli Tepe at all?
Göbekli Tepe. Well, of course, they're continent apart, half a world apart. I've not heard that comparison. That's a great question. whether those statues I showed you from Tiwanaku have a comparison to Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. But I will say that there is a huge comparison to the tiki statues, the Easter Island Moai, with the headgear, with the big eyes and the elongated ears. And they were called the long ears when Easter Island was discovered by the Dutch on Easter Sunday. They were really fascinated with the two races of people that lived on Easter Island. One were very tall white people, smaller in number, bigger in stature. By the time Captain Cook got there a few decades later, there were no more of the tall whites. The Polynesian had used the arms the Dutch left behind and wiped out their adversaries. And all the statues got toppled over. So they're just like, we're done with you guys. We're getting out of here. Get off our island. And that's the way Easter Island left. Yeah.
Hi. So my friend went to Peru and he was talking about how the locals have so many interesting stories about like duendes and all these like really cool things that we don't really talk about in the Western world. Throughout your travels in South America, what was one of the coolest stories really quickly that you could just summarize that you heard from one of the locals?
Well, I do know that Tony Rodriguez is going to talk about Peru and his experiences down there. Boy, so many things. Let me think. One of the coolest stories. Well, as I alluded to, the South Americans, most especially the Peruvians, they're totally cool with ETs. So we had a couple shaman join our trip and they said, oh, we've met them face to face. We've had CE5 experience with ETs because we're not afraid of them. I think it would be a different situation here in America because we've just got so many preconceived notions and maybe all our Hollywood movies doing alien invasion stuff that we're kind of freaked out by the whole thing, but they're not that way down there, which I thought really refreshing. James Rink.
Hello. Yeah, great presentation. So
Thank you.
quick comment. The Black Goo Queen was captured in the Falkland War, and she has been split between CERN and an island controlled by the Vatican and the Mediterranean Sea. So she is being tortured, and they're trying to get her secrets from her, but they won't be successful. So I'm doing a show about the Black Goo Queen coming up, and I think you should be on it if you want to discuss it later. But I also wanted to ask you, can you comment about the monster they found under Lake Vostok? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do know about it. I just didn't bring it up in my talk because there's just only hearsay that the Russians not only drilled a hole, got water samples, found some bacteria that's never been seen before, but then the backstory is they got some personnel down there and went scuba diving, and there was some kind of sea monster that confronted them with a great loss of life. And because I guess that's so scary to most people, even in Russia, they just didn't want to bring it out, but the story leaked. Yep. Good question, James.
James, what's the Black Goo Queen?
Yeah.
I don't even know.
Can't leave us hanging, man.
Okay. Yeah. I guess I should have explained that more. So there are many different kingdoms underneath this planet, and each the underground kingdoms control the surface. So basically, what we're seeing right now is an underground war going on with the Cabal trying to take over these underground kingdoms. So we have a water kingdom, and water itself has consciousness. There's a gold kingdom as well, where such as kingdoms like El Dorado, which is located under Trinidad, and I've done a show about that. And then we have the Black Goo kingdom, and that's connected to oil. So just like gold is, there's two different types of gold, just regular gold, and then we have living gold. And then same thing with water. There's a special type of water called living water, and each one of these kingdoms carry its own memory. So and they're all ancient. But we will share some more information about the Black Goo Queen coming up in a future show. Thank you.
Or you can ask him tomorrow on the SSP panel.
The super black goo.
Hi, Brad.
Hey.
I was just asking about any inkling of like inner Earth or anything on your travels.
Oh, yeah. Well, I kind of alluded to that with the under ice domes, the inner Earth, with the Nazis being absolutely fascinated with it, going on expeditions in Tibet, trying to get down to the mythical cities under the Tibetan plateau. Many Tibetans were found in the bunker at the end of World War II, and they were wearing full Nazi regalia. If it wasn't for one of the Russian soldiers who had been from Siberia that could identify them and said, hey, they're all Tibetans, and they just committed suicide together. There were high-ranking, even SS officers from Tibet in Nazi Germany at the end of the war. So there was some kind of connection, and I do believe they were trying to find inner Earth, and this was their part of their story of going to Antarctica as well.
All right. Thanks.
Sure.
Yeah, on that board outside, I have some information about Karl Haushofer going missing. The U-boat 52 or whatever it was that went missing, they finally heard back from them in handwriting a letter that this family received that they basically claimed they found inner Earth. They said the Earth is hollow. We found it. This will be our last transmission, but we're okay. And that information's out on the board if you're interested.
Wow. Our journey to truth continues. Yeah, good one. Hi there.
Where is the no-fly zone?
The no-fly zone is over the South Pole on that one spot that Linda Moulton Howe whistleblower said the no-fly zone was.
There was a scientist that got really sick in one of the places, and they sent a rescue plane through the no-fly zone and told them they could not talk about anything that they've seen or experienced. But I think that's a real story.
Yeah, that was Brian S. with Linda Moulton Howe.
Yeah,
I've listened to his interview several times. Really great stuff. And I think that is the reality, is that there is this hole into an inner Earth civilization. And the Nazis found it nearly 100 years ago.
Yeah, I think they let them fly over it, but they had to go at a way higher elevation than usual. They had to stay at a certain elevation.
But they could see it from far away. And then Brian S. also said that there was a ramp going down, so you could get like a snowcat out of the South Pole station and drive down into the hole. And that's where Admiral Byrd flew his plane in his diary and also went down there.
Okay, Brad, a couple of days ago, Sunday, we talked about a sighting in Cusco that the government and the construction company opened up. All right. And it went down in tunnels and found the possible giants due to the sculptures that were found there. And I'm thinking it was on Telegram, SEE, the word C, and it's called Ancient Knowledge. If anybody else in this audience has seen that video, Brad's looking for a copy of it. I couldn't find it. I think I got it on my phone somewhere. But if you all know, just get a hold of Brad with that video. It's very short. It's about a 5-minute video. But these guys went down tunnels and they put lights in it and got down into the bottom level, and man, it was bigger in this room down there. Oh. And they had an alien that looks like it's related to the Zeta, you know, with the short guy with the big black eyes, right? You know, but this was huge. I mean, it was just gigantic, bigger than Paula Bunyan, you know, those type of statues.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
And I do have the Admiral Byrd missing diary out there in the board. You can pull it out and read it if you want as well.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'll take some pictures of it too.
Hey, Brad.
Hi.
The precisely shaped stones of Sacsayhuaman and other megalithic sites around the world, have you ever thought about the possibility that those might be cast concrete, you know, like they might be cast in situ?
Yeah, and I mentioned that with Puma Punku, that there is a theory that this was poured concrete. And I've seen some videos. They make a good case. And some of those stones do look like poured concrete. Now, having some experience pouring concrete myself, I can tell you what the trowel marks look like. That was the tell for me, was those marks that just look like those stones are being shaped, not only in South America, but also Egypt. So some of the oldest cultures of the world have signs of this, this cold fusion technology, as well as auditive levitation, a method to move those heavy stones.
Well, that's another thing, because the moving of the blocks for these sites around the world, it seems like that the extremely sophisticated cultures who built these sites wouldn't have wanted to deal with moving them. They would just cast them in situ, you know?
Yep. One of the episodes of Ancient Aliens I was on, I talked about auditive levitation. And an example I use is an opera singer who's able to shatter a wine glass with just her voice. So that proves that sound and vibration can affect matter. So if you reach the right resonance frequency, which all of us have, which this computer, this podium, everything has, you can manipulate matter in such a way that you can render it weightless or like a wine glass, shatter it. So there's so much we still don't know about some of these ancient sciences, which I think were employed in the building of these megalithic sites.
All right, that's all the time we have now.
So I actually don't have a question, but I have a statement.
Sure.
And an offer to you if you want someone's information. So one of my real dear friends down in Charleston, he's a former military, does contract work still now, but his great uncle drove the U-boat that dropped Hitler off in Argentina.
Wow, I'd love to get some of that
And
information.
so he was raised as a small child by having stories from his great uncle that you better be prepared because communism will be on America's doorstep in your lifetime. And so this friend is about 46 years old. So yeah, just letting you know.
Have you ever heard of Philip Schneider, who was working on the project? His dad was Oscar Schneider, also a U-boat captain, who didn't tell Philip until his deathbed that he was a U-boat captain. So a lot of these Nazis, they came over here with Project Paperclip.
Yeah.
They got new identities and they just blended in. Werner von Braun, one of the fathers of the space industry, helped start up NASA. He was a paperclip Nazi. I got a picture of him in my book, Future Esoteric, in his Third Reich SS uniform.
Yeah. His uncle was well known. He's in the history book. So he shared me his information. So he's a known man, but yeah, he's the one who drove the U-boat and dropped him off.
Wow. Well, let's definitely talk about that afterwards.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you, Abby. Barry?
Greetings, Brad. How you doing? I want to know if you know anything about these octagon structures that are supposed to exist in Antarctica, both underneath and above. And Linda Moulton Howe did a whistleblower thing. And so I don't know if you knew anything about.
Sure, I do. Yeah. Well, only from the testimony of Linda of Spartan 1 and 2, who spoke of this craft made out of black obsidian or very hard black substance up on the Beardmore Glacier, the same place that Brian S. said he saw the silver discs. The Beardmore Glacier is a very interesting place. That is where the Antarctic Party, including the Admiral Scott party, went up the Beardmore Glacier. They got bogged down because they were collecting all these fossil samples up on a mountain, and they're going to bring them back to the Royal Society and never made it because they're carrying too many rocks. But the Beardmore Glacier, that's where they said this obsidian ship was located too. I guess we're just going to have to go there to find out, Barry. You ready to pack
You've
your
heard
bag?
anything about the beings that might have been associated with the entities?
They never said they saw beings. Just there was some kind of illumination inside those craft when they went there, and things were very intuitive that they could just touch a door and it would open and things like that. So I think the jury's out, but great question.
All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you, Brad, so much. That was amazing.
Thank you all.